Hey folks, how you doing? Matt Williams here, and I'm back to finally give my review of The Great Gatsby. It has been a long time since I did one of these reviews, and yeah, well, I'm a little rusty, so bear with me. Now, as you can see, I have my Every Child Matters shirt on. It's one of several, actually, that I own in honor of Truth and Reconciliation Day, which, well, around here we don't really need that day as a reason to wear one of these shirts. So, like I said, I got like four or five that Carla got me. And what I'm drinking right now is something I just discovered today. Category 12's Event Horizon Dark Lager. As you can imagine, that sold me right out the gate. And oh, they have a lovely, lovely picture there of a supermassive black hole with the large accretion disk, the really, really bright thing. If you've seen Interstellar, you know what you're looking at here, right? And, however, I should say that you know what that actually is? Yeah, that's infalling gas and dust that circles around a supermassive black hole. It's accelerated by its gravity to the point that it is just pumping out light and radiation at all manner of wavelengths. And because of general relativity, the way space-time is curved in the presence of a big gravitational field, especially one this intense, it looks like the disk is both going around the equator and around the poles. But in fact, what you're seeing around the poles is actually just it's light from that disk around the back that is basically following this intense curvature of space-time, so it appears like the whole thing's lit up like some big double halo. I think that's interesting anyway. And that, yeah, and that is actually that before there were any pictures of an event horizon, which the first one was taken in 2019. That was simulated by Kip Thorne and his colleagues from NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory at Caltech. They had been called in as consultants for the movie Interstellar, and they put all the data into this big simulation. That's what it cranked out. And it just happened to be an accurate prediction. Oh, and it's really dark. So, cheers. And quite nice too. Light, but dark, toasty, tawny. A little bit of toffee, definitely a bit of coffee. Quite impressive. They do good work, Category 12. Anyway, to get to my review of The Great Gatsby, it's been so long since I've read this, but thanks to Goodreads, I was part of a lot of cool sort of discussion forums there that talked about this. And it is a book I had the honor of teaching at the high school level. Only once. But yeah, it was a fun time. And if there's one thing for anyone who has not read The Great Gatsby, but it is definitely on several lists of the top 10 books that people claim to have read but haven't or are hoping to read because American classic, right? But yeah, they're just waiting to get around to it. Well, I hope this will actually be helpful because as I learned myself, it's that Gatsby, F. Scott Fitzgerald's work, like any modernist writer of his day, there, any case of modernist literature, it's like they weren't going for accessibility, right? So if you read it, it'll kind of seem like the story is boring, and I'm not even sure what point they're trying to make. But it's because, yeah, they were very concerned in that era with originality, breaking free of past conventions, and something that emerged from that was the whole show don't tell premise, right? And that applies more to film, like the movies of Stanley Kubrick and David Lynch. Huh. Yeah, those movies make a lot more sense to you if you're familiar with modernist literature. Yeah, in the same sense, basically, the modernists would describe what's going on in a scene, but not tell you. And that was always really quite interesting. And so if you want to read any of works of literature in that time, James Joyce is another very perfect example. It helps to have a primer, right? This is what to look for because they're going to be engaging in all kinds of symbolism and allegorical comparisons there and references, and they're going to drop historical references too. And that's something Fitzgerald was really very good at. And The Great Gatsby, it is well known. His work was it sort of characterized the popular mood of the 1920s, the jazz age, and the roaring 20s, right? So he talked a lot about the lifestyles of the rich and famous, and the sort of whole party scene and so forth, all the drinking and the boozing and the fast cars and the opulent parties and all that stuff. But he was not peddling the the sort of propaganda of that age. He was not at all trying to say that this was a fun time, right? As a member of that the sort of East Coast elite in New York State around this exact same time, um, he had a lot to say about rich people and about how they behaved, how they got away with all manner of bad behavior. And that is something that has not diminished in relevance at all. In fact, Gatsby is one of many novels over the ages that established the whole social critique of the whole American dream idea is a myth. And it's something that is designed to essentially it's propaganda, much like nationalism or, well, religion and politics. It is what is used by those in power and those with wealth and power to get people to buy into the system, to basically work hard, keep their heads down, their mouths shut, and not to be radical. And in America, there is a very long and rich history of that, and it is really quite cool too, because many of a lot of the things I mentioned that are worth reading, like Captains of Consciousness, for example. That right there is a very good example of a sociological study that looked at mass culture, looking back to the 1920s when this was really engineered in the first place, and seeing it in terms of what it was really all about, which is to say, its purpose was social in nature and economic in nature. It wasn't something that happened on its own. It wasn't a natural occurrence. It was specifically designed and implemented by rich people who were hoping to dissuade workers from, on the one hand, joining the Communist Party and becoming Fabian socialists and other radical groups that were trying to reform the system, the economic system from pretty much the ground up. They were trying to undermine that, encourage workers not to vote that way, while at the same time expanding their customer base, because mass production required mass consumption, and given the crappy wages that industrialists were paying their workers pretty much up until that point, yeah, there was no way that was going to happen. So anyway, Gatsby was Fitzgerald's own sort of his inside look at the world of the rich and the powerful and the leisure class. And it was very fitting that he would write a book that basically conveyed his true feelings about the people and the life. Because on the one hand, yeah, he was sort of advertising it and speaking to it and drawing attention to it. There, it's what made him successful. Right on up until the Great Depression. At that point, people didn't want to read about rich people anymore and the lifestyles of the rich and famous. That was kind of his. That's kind of what put the nail, the first of several nails in his coffin. I think of his literary coffin, not not. Oh, that's confusing. The nail in the coffin of his literary career, not literally. Oh dear. I need a second here. Okay. So, having recovered from that bad wordplay, um, yeah. So, another thing that is sort of lesser known, unless of course you are familiar with the book and just a lot of the editorial information about it, a lot of stuff about the personal life of Fitzgerald himself. It was so very based on his own life. And not just to say that he, sort of condensed or crystallized his experiences being an outsider who had joined the ranks of the rich and famous, but no, directly from his life. The characters in it were very much inspired by real people he knew, and he was sort of lampooning them and satirizing them, and he was also doing that to himself. So to break that down a little bit, Fitzgerald, right? He came from middle class origins. His parents sent him to boarding school, which they could afford, and the entire time he was studying among these rich kids, he was always reminded of the fact that he was an outsider. And the family sort of fell on hard times, as I recall, as he got older, and he had to pay his own way, and he made a living by writing, and eventually became very, very successful at it. And so he was able to take care of things, of himself, of his family, and live a high end kind of experience, a high rent kind of living. And yes, and while he was yes, early 20s, I would believe, it was at that point that he tried to propose to a rich woman, and I can't remember the names of the real life characters, unfortunately. But yeah, this woman became the basis for Daisy in the novel, and the guy she ended up marrying, who was, as far as Fitzgerald was concerned, a real dick, was Tom Buchanan in the story. And yes, Jordan is actually the a good friend of Daisy's, and a socialite. She's based on a real person, a woman golfer from that era, and above all else, his characters of Nick Carraway, the narrator, the non-judgmental outsider guy, and Jay Gatz, aka Jay Gatsby, are both him, Fitzgerald. And I'll tell you why in a second here. Because, yeah, so in Fitzgerald's life, he proposed to this woman, and even though they were very, very fond of each other, he was in love with her. She couldn't accept, and from, as rumor has it, it was her father who told him that, no, you're not getting married. And why? Because you're a poor boy. Rich girls don't marry poor boys. And that was before his literary success. So he would eventually go on to meet Zelda Fitzgerald, whom he was very much in love with as well, and his that was his true love, and they got together and so forth. And so a lot about this book was not only conveying his true feelings about the rich and the leisure class, but also a bit of symbolic revenge. It's like, look at me now, man, I'm rich and famous. But yeah, another aspect of that for him was that even though he was rich and famous, he still didn't feel like he was one of them. And that was something that really kind of irked him and chafed him throughout his life. And that too is another part of the whole, the American dream thing. Oh, it's a myth, right? The rich, the blue bloods, they are exactly like any type of aristocrats you'll find anywhere else. You look in Britain there, where it's assumed that class distinction is more of a thing, and from what I'm told, from actual British persons, that yes, it is. Compared to Canada and the States, it is more of a thing there. But if you look at the American elite, at yes, the people who basically all been living the same existence since for well over a century or two, which is to say, yeah, the kids grow up, lots of parents are well-moneyed. They get sent to boarding school. They go on to Ivy League schools. They then take over the family business, or something related to it. And yeah, and of course their names are synonymous with wealth. The Rockefellers, the Kennedys, the Bushes, the Kochs, the uh, other people. Your experience may vary. And but yeah, it's like this is a closed society, and they do not take kindly to newcomers, right? New money. So basically, he was arguing in this book that the American, the wealthy class, they're aristocrats like any other, and they don't take kindly to imposters or pretenders or just someone who's trying to fit in. In any case, and that is Jay Gatsby to a T. And so, as I said, Fitzgerald in this book, and this is just my theory, and I'm totally basing it off of something Oscar Wilde did in Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man, right? There are three central characters in that book, and according to this editorial breakdown I read, it's like they're all versions of Oscar Wilde himself, how he views himself, how he thinks others view him, and who he is. Or no, and who he wants to be. Yeah, that's right. So, in this case, I thought for sure you'd look at the characters of Nick Carraway and Gatsby, who become friends in the story, and Nick becomes the chronicler of Gatsby and the guy lamenting his death when the story ends. He, in my estimation, it's like that is how Fitzgerald viewed himself, as the honest man, the non-judgmental man, the Midwesterner, which yeah, that's where the Fitzgeralds came from originally. And who is now a fish out of water in the story, coming to New York State and living in this place West Egg, right, which is basically a peninsula right next to East Egg, another peninsula, which is where all the rich people live, and the middle class, working class people live on the west side there. And Gatsby, on the other hand, I think, is exactly how he figured other people saw him. This lavish person, this playboy, but a guy who did not fit in, who was not of that world, and who was naive and a pretender, for sure, and ultimately whose whole goal to become like them leads to his own destruction. And there's a very, very clear and it is actually pretty well spelled out there in the book there, even though it is spelled out in a very modernist way. Gatsby's whole quest here, which for those who aren't familiar, to break down succinctly, Gatsby was a poor boy from the Midwest. He meets Daisy Buchanan as the story's unfolding. She marries Tom Buchanan. Yeah, he met her and she was his sweetheart and they were very much in love. But he wanted to marry her, but then he was sent off to fight in World War One as of 1917, and he had always hoped, that I'm going to come back after the war and we're going to get married and so forth. But he learns while he's away that she's married somebody else. And Jordan in the story, she's relating to Nick, as Nick is learning all about the backstory of these people. Daisy is his cousin, just for the record. That's how he knows to drop in on her. That's how he starts bearing witness to all this. Anyway, he is told that yeah, Daisy really didn't want to marry Tom. In fact, she got drunk the day of the wedding and tried to back out of it, but they sobered her up, pushed her in there, and then after that, she was pretending to be happy. She seemed to have convinced herself of things, but as he shows up, he sees that Daisy is in fact rather miserable. And main reason, hang on, gotta let Sombrero in. Yeah. The main reason being that Tom is having an affair, which is typical of guys like him in his position. And they have a daughter, and she's not happy in their life, but she's not prepared to get a divorce and so forth. Anyway, so while all that is happening, Nick becomes aware of a newcomer, this guy who moves into East Egg there, buys this mansion. He's got a green light, or there is a green light at the end of the Buchanan's dock, and Nick will see him out there standing and watching. And he's throwing these lavish parties, inviting all the people over, and yeah, he becomes a bit of a legend. His name is Gatsby, and yeah, when that name is dropped in Daisy's presence, she becomes rather, she reacts rather suddenly. She's like, "What? Gatsby? What Gatsby?" And yes, so immediately we're made aware of the fact that, oh yeah, there's something going on there. And so um, the guy starts holding all these lavish parties. He eventually invites Nick over to hang out at a party and also to hang out with him personally. And he's putting on all these airs, which are pretty clear. It's like, oh, I went to Oxford, and yeah, I served in the war. I got this medal. Look at that, and look at my lovely house. Look at my boats. Look at my cars, and all that stuff. He's showing off all these trappings, trying to convince Nick that he is one of them. And he also asks Nick to arrange a meeting in which he agrees. And Daisy comes over thinking she's having lunch with him, and she sees Gatsby. And it's like, they're staring at each other. They're that way for a while, and Nick is now made aware of the true intent behind all this. It's like, yes, I knew that you two were related. I've been holding parties here, hoping that Daisy would show up and realize who I was. And he's now that they are seeing each other and she sees his wealth and so forth, he's hoping she'll leave Tom and come be with him. Oh, sorry, spoilers there. I will refrain from the rest of the spoilers. But yeah, so what follows from that is, of course, yeah, the drama, right? Trying to get her to leave Tom, and of course, she's not prepared to. And yeah, bad things happen. Okay, I cannot avoid the spoilers. A vehicular manslaughter incident happens as the um, as Gatsby, Nick, Jordan, Tom, and Daisy all go into town there. It becomes, the cat is let out of the bag there. Tom realizes Gatsby is having sex with my wife again. And so he drops the bomb and reveals, although it was already made clear at this point, Gatsby got rich off of bootlegging. And so, yes, he's basically saying, oh, she can't marry you, you're a criminal. Whereas, yeah, in his youth, he was basically made aware of the fact that Daisy's not going to marry you, you're poor. And so that right there is a very key message about the American dream, right? It's like rich people, they're born into this. It's that privilege, that wealth, the opulence and the leisure, that is something you're born into. It's not something that you can just attain. And you can work your ass off as much as you possibly can. You can scrimp and save and sacrifice. And we are let in on the fact that, yeah, young Jay Gatz, before he changes his name to Gatsby to hide his family origin, it seems. Yeah, he did all this. He worked hard. He paid his dues. He became sort of apprenticed by a rich guy, but rather than having money left him, the widow ended up taking it all away. And so, yeah, basically, after Gatsby almost gets killed in the war, he decides, I'm going to make it big. I don't care what it takes because I'm getting Daisy back. So his pursuit of the American dream, Daisy is symbolic of that. And as Nick would say, him standing on his dock looking at the green light at the end of her dock, that is the American dream right there. It's symbolic of that. And yeah, he goes on to describe that, that dream of someday, tomorrow or tomorrow after that, all our hard work, all our aspirations, they're gonna yield something, and so we move on. We keep carrying on, we keep doing that. But yeah, as Gatsby sort of demonstrates, it's like, well, you can get the money, but you'll never become one of them. And when the vehicular manslaughter thing takes place, um, which, yes, again, spoilers, it was Daisy was driving his car, or yeah, in a weird sort of dramatic procedural twist. They're actually driving Tom's car back from New York. Daisy's in the driver's seat, and they end up hitting Tom's mistress, who, yeah, she is the wife of this shop owner. He's the guy that sold Tom that car, and yeah, and that is yeah, that's how Tom met her in the first place. And yes, he's been seeing her on the side and renting a nice apartment for her and so forth in the city. And so that Gatsby chooses, he informs Nick that, yeah, Daisy was in fact driving. She was running out into the street because she thought, this is Tom's car, Tom's here. And she has been, doing much of the same thing that Gatsby was doing, trying to get Tom to leave his wife and be with her. But he won't do that. You don't leave your rich marriage prospect. Mm. Quite good. And so, yeah, while running and attempting to flag them down, Daisy accidentally hits her, but she just keeps driving. And Gatsby, he does not inform on her, right? The police begin investigating. Gatsby is not arrested. They come by, they question him, they leave, and they're with the intent of coming back. So automatically, you see, yeah, how the rich people can get away with murder, basically. So he, however, lets everyone think that it was him driving because he's protecting her. And he's just, now that their affair has been made public, he's just waiting for Daisy to come by, saying she's left Tom and she's coming to him. And instead, Myrtle, that's her name, Tom's mistress, her husband puts two and two together, realizes the car's the one I sold Tom, shows up at his house with a gun. And Tom says, "What? It wasn't us. It wasn't me. I wasn't driving that car. It was Gatsby." And he goes over to Gatsby's house and murders him and commits suicide. So yeah, a murder-suicide kind of pact there. Um, and Nick finds out about all of this, and he is absolutely just pissed that that Tom let Gatsby get murdered, and that Gatsby took the rap, and that Daisy seems to have absolutely no problems with how things turned out because her and Tom, they take off to Europe to get away from all this carnage and confusion. And so, and none of Gatsby's friends, none of them come to the funeral because, of course, they weren't friends. They were people who hung out at his parties or at his house, mooched off of him, but did not give two shits about him, and would not cross the street to piss on him if he was on fire, because in the end, his secret's out. He was a bootlegger, and the guys he was working with, yeah, they're mobbed up. They rigged the World Series too, and had other kind of racketeering stuff going on. And so, they're all broken up. Yeah, his business associates, they're actually broken up and tearful. But for them, it's like, oh, it's part of the business, man. People get killed. People get whacked. You got to move on. And yeah, so in terms of more of the symbolism there, right? Yeah, the green light is one of them. Also, you have the egg illusions and Daisy, her name itself, right? Egg is, you take an egg, it's what? It's a yellow core with a white exterior. Same with a daisy. White petals and golden interior. And this was Fitzgerald's symbolic reference for how the kind of opulence and even purity that rich, fancy people will put out there it hides, it conceals a destructive core because that, as Nick says, that's what these people do. They break things, they break people, and then they retreat into their wealth to avoid consequences. So yeah, he's making a very strong indictment against all that. And the symbolism certainly, there's more of that there too. And a lot of he does a lot to display how the rich, the symbolism of their wealth. Blue, of course, is a clear reference there. It's the um, it is the symbol of aristocracy, blue bloods, right? And it's paired and contrasted with red that's shown in scenes, which is, yes, of course, the once again the allusion to destruction and death and blood. And yeah, the class distinction is also comes up a lot there too. It's like when Nick and Tom, they're heading into New York because Tom is like, yeah, I'm going to introduce you to my girl. It's like, you're the cousin of my wife, and I'm showing you my mistress? Because that's just apparently how arrogant and stupid the guy is. But yeah, as they're driving from East Egg, they're going through what's known as the Valley of Ashes. And yeah, this is like the working class area. It's a dumping ground. It's a junkyards and such, and it's also where you have the auto shop, the garage there that's run by Myrtle's husband. Uh, Name I can't remember. Too bad. And yeah, and on the way there's a billboard that's an optometrist ad with these blue eyes looking, and it's very much this comes up there. The husband is looking at this billboard when he realizes that, oh my god, that's Tom's car. It's the one I sold him. Oh my god, it was him. Yeah, that revelation hits him there, and it's like this is sort of like the omniscient God, or just the moral of the story. All of that, looking down at people and being just separate from them because, of course, they don't have a clue. And also, yeah, Myrtle herself, when she is having a soiree in New York, once Tom and Nick get there, you got all these middle class folk gathered into this cramped apartment, and they're all putting on airs. And it's like Myrtle's her description, like how she appears when Tom and Nick first come by the garage, and she's like this picture of sensuousness, not like pretty rich girl kind of beauty, but like a real sort of voluptuous sexual energy about her. And then when they get into the city and she's in her place there, she changes her clothes into something a bit more frilly and frou-frou, and her speech, her behavior is entirely different. She's acting like a rich girl, or how she thinks they behave. And the name Versailles is dropped in there. It's, I believe, the name of a furniture company. And Nick is looking around. It's like, this whole place is very middle income level, but there are all these attempts here to try and feign richness, to appear like to emulate the leisure class. And so, yeah, the name of the furniture company being Versailles, the palace of Louis XIV lived, and well, all those monarchs until well, just two more, the 15th and 16th. 16th, French Revolution. After that, yeah, it's more of a tourist attraction or whatnot. Anyway, so yeah, that there's sort of like a bit of irony.